G'day, H.M. Mahari here. And replying to another comment, and the question was, on the video that I did, BPD Entitlement, the internal split projected out, why do some people only do this with life partners, or intimate partners? And then the commenter said, I'm guessing it's emotional flashbacks, but can't understand why the specific target. And this goes to what I'm often talking about when it comes to the fact that the closer you are to somebody with borderline personality disorder, many, most actually, unless they get a lot of significant treatment, which takes quite a while, they're relating to you as object other in idealization, good parent representation, or the parent they didn't have, in devaluation, bad parent, wounding parent, just bad parent. And so what happens with this? It's really key. I drop it in the middle of videos a lot, but I think maybe just doing a hopefully not too long video here to explain this is people with BPD have that arrested emotional development by the age of 2. And that means that they didn't attach at all, or securely for sure, no secure attachment, interrupted attachment at best, and perhaps not really attachment as other people would know it at worst. And so then when they get really close to somebody, and especially in intimate significant other relationships, you take on, because they see everybody emotionally, subconsciously, like a parent, like the wounding, abandoning, or whatever's perceived or actually happened with that parent, or quote, bad parent, or emotionally unavailable parent. And so they're not really even seeing you. And this is really important to remember. It's hard for people to get, it's hard, not intellectually, but it's hard to grasp, what do you mean by that? It doesn't make any sense to me, because everybody grows up one way or the other. So people with BPD get the arrested emotional development, get the interrupted attachment. People with codependency, they have object constancy or object permanence, but they have their own woundedness to not the same depth as somebody with BPD, wherein they might have anxious or avoidant attachment, or they might be able to attach quite well, but there's a few things in the mix there. So, but nothing like the way that people with BPD unknowingly are relating to everyone, but especially those close to them, as if they were or are just like, or in fact subconsciously are, the parent that wounded them, or the parent that let them down, or the parent that abandoned them. And so they're not even seeing you. And this is something that I still have to do a video or more on, about what's happening in idealization, because you're not being a lot more seen in idealization than you are in devaluation. And then the commenter also said what they couldn't understand was why this specific target. Well, it's not that you're being specifically targeted, because you're not being related to at all. You're not being targeted at all. Yeah, you're the one in the situation that might be getting the silent treatment or screamed at, or all kinds of different things, like, push, pull, get away closer, and all that. And you're experiencing it, and it's hurting you. But they're not even aware that they don't have that other reference, so they're not really aware of what's happening to you, because it's dissociative on their part, triggered emotional dysregulation that goes to age regression. And the repetition compulsion cycles of re-experiencing what happened to them in the past with a parent, they're experiencing it in the here and now, at you, through you, to you, but not about you, if that makes sense. And then you said, I'm guessing it's emotional flashbacks. Yes, well, the difference being that for those who have been abused in a certain way in childhood, there are flashbacks to that type of major violation type of abuse. Then there are flashbacks to adverse experiences, and flashbacks are more understood, and I think a more appropriate term for complex post-traumatic stress disorder than borderline personality disorder, because it's not exactly flashbacks in borderline personality. It's repetition compulsion cycles of re-experiencing dissociatively the past. So is that a form of a flashback? I guess one could say that, but it's not the most accurate descriptor of what's really happening there. So the reason that you are, to answer this commenter's question or anyone in your shoes, is feeling like, or the way you describe it, the commenter describes it as, but I don't understand why the specific target. Well, it's because you got inside. It's because you got in there. It's because you got close. And now everything that that they're projecting out, that they're unaware of, is going to land on you. It's the same thing with your significant other and or intimate partner, the commenter is. And so what's happening to you from a person with BPD is actually being done in a repetition re-experience dissociative way it's a response back in defense to not trusting, interrupted attachment, the experience with parents or wounding parent. So it's not even you. They don't even see you. And so when you say why this specific target, it's because you are now, by the nature of trying to be close, being maybe attached yourself, but the person with BPD is unlikely to be very attached at all and not really know how to love and be in a more childlike, needy place, because they often confuse need for love. So you're not really being specifically targeted other than that you are that close. In other words, really too close. Because that's another reason why, I haven't done that video yet, but it's another reason why these relationships don't work out. Because you're not being seen for who you really are. So the kinder you are, the more you love, the more you try to compromise, the more you try to give, they still see you through this dissociative age regress lens when they're triggered, or when they feel engulfed versus when they're fearing abandonment. They still see you as the object other representation of that parent, and they're not really seeing you. And that says a lot about why people with those with BPD are in such worlds of hurt, because you're not really, it's not mutual and reciprocal, because they're not really relating to you. They're relating more through you to their past in repetition, compulsion, cyclic ways that they don't consciously understand. And that comes again from that lack of self-reference, which gives them no reference for other, just, quote, object other, unquote, meaning the reference goes immediately back to to when they were a child, to the ruptured relationship, interrupted attachment at a very young age. And then this is a primal reality, so they don't have any words to describe. They're not consciously aware of it unless they get a heck of a lot of therapy. And then so they don't even remember. They don't know what's happening there, so they can't explain it, even though they're not really good at explaining things about how they behave or why they act the way they do unless a lot of treatment, because they're still in this emotional, primal age regress place. And so I hope that helps to explain that, because it's more than, I think it's safe to say it's more than an emotional flashback. Not like the flashbacks of certain types of adverse experience that people have experienced, a high percentage of those with BPD. It's not really like the flashbacks that happen in CPTSD, although it could be, I guess it could be similar, but I would say that there is even more dissociation. And the other thing too is that the person with BPD who's having these repetition compulsions and this re-experiencing dissociatively in the here and now of the past over and over and over again, aiming it at a loved one or significant other, when it has nothing to do with you and they can't tell the difference at that point, it's not exactly the same. As it may have qualities of a flashback, but it's not only that, it's even more than that. So again, if you're looking to love somebody with BPD, they're not able to see you and attach to you and love you the way that you might think they are or were, and the way that you love or attach to them. So it's really important to understand what's happening for people with BPD is that they have the emotional arrested development is really important to understand, because that's where they stop growing emotionally. That's where they are, when they relate to people, that's the very young primal place from which there's any reference to do any relating. People with BPD do learn lots of things intellectually, and they might use some of that in a relational process, but then what they're doing is they're trying to do their best to relate to you, but they're actually doing it from the intellect and not a combination of intellect and emotion, or emotion where emotion should be in the lead in an intimate relationship, or intimate times in a relationship, whether that's, physical and or emotional intimacy or emotional intimacy. But people with BPD don't do emotional intimacy. The arrested development just makes it impossible. So it's really important to understand, it's not that you're, if you're the significant other or the ex of somebody with BPD, they weren't really targeting you at all. But you went through it, and you were the one who got hurt, and you were the one pointed at, and you were the one blamed, and you were the one aimed at. But people with BPD often don't understand that, and I'm not making an excuse for it. This is just the reality of it. They have a lot that isn't in their conscious awareness because they have a lost self. And the arrested emotional development means emotionally they're not going to be able to attach or love. And often they will do that in some fashion, or convince others they've done that, attached or love you. But it's done in this intellectual way. They know what to say. They kind of know how to try to be. But in fairness to those with BPD, even to explain it this way, if they're not aware of what's happened to them, if they're not aware of this object other relating, if they're not aware of the lost self, if they're not aware they have no self-other reference, just not as targeted as people think it is. But when you're the one that gets close, whether it's favorite person or whether it's significant other, partner, or you could even be a sibling relationship, when you are the one that is closest, but especially in significant other partner relationships, they're totally experiencing you in repetition, compulsion ways that they don't know in consciousness in their mind as that either idealized parent, object other representation of good parent or parent never had, into valuation as the object other representation of bad parent. So, it leaves partners, people with BPD, especially untreated, it leaves partners invisible. Totally invisible. And you're standing in the space of the object other parent representation, and they are yelling and screaming, and they might be telling you it's because you didn't clean the table tonight or you didn't do the dishes. So they'll bring up something from the now. That's the intellect working, because they have to come up with something intellectually to try to explain what's going on, for why they're annoyed or whatever emotions they're showing you or not showing you, because they don't know what it is. And even when I'm saying this right now, people out there with BPD could hear it. People out there with BPD might relate to it. But unless they've had a lot of significant therapy, they're not going to understand what it actually means for their experience in their life in trying to relate to others. You're getting aimed at. You are, in air quotes, the target, but not really at all. And you're not being seen. And this is on the other side of that, when you love them, when you're kind to them, when you validate, when you're trying to do everything it is that they really want you to do, and then some, they can't trust it. They can't take it in. Again, they don't have a self there with which to do that. And so they just, the lack of trust is, again, another manifestation of the object other relating, that they don't see you. And this split, every time they split to devalue, it cancels out everything else that you've done. And they have to keep coming back in a repetition compulsion cycle way to what doesn't work, what can't work, what they can't trust. And you are invisible. So it's not that you're being targeted as a human being, but you're there getting hurt, but it's not even about you. And this is what's so destructive about these relationships, because people with BPD aren't usually, 90% of the time, aren't even doing this consciously or on purpose or in a targeting manner. So, and that's something that a lot of people are saying online that's not accurate. People with BPD are not narcissists. Their defenses aren't as elaborate. They have a capacity for empathy. There's a lot of difference. when you are asking questions like this commenter did, or if you're asking them in your own life, or if you're in therapy asking them, people have to look at why are they still in these relationships. And that's not to devalue the person with BPD. It's just to say to people, you're over your limits. You can't help rescue or fix them. And if they don't want to go get help and change, which can take, 6 to 16 years to really get them out of this horrible sort of start in life they had, it's not healthy to be there. These relationships aren't healthy and don't work for these very base reasons of what's at the heart of borderline personality.